Welcome to Fighting on Film, the podcast about classic and obscure war movies. From the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to cover it. I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
I'm Robbie of RA Military History.
Suppose we should jump in and explain what the actual film is. So, spoiler warnings.
If you haven't seen a film released in 1940.
And you have no excuse. The film's only 8 minutes long, so it's super short.
Very short.
And it's freely available online as well, so you have no excuse not to go and watch it before you listen to our ramblings about Miss Grant Goes to the Door.
It's directed by Brian Desmond Hurst. Movie buffs would know that he directed films such as Theirs is the Glory,
which we covered in our first episode.
Malta's Story. He also helped produce The Lion Has Wings, which is another propaganda piece.
So I don't know a great deal about the Ministry of Information, but it seems to me that they were sort of like a government production company, and they were the ones behind the films, producing them, funding them, and sort of directing how they were going to tell certain bits of information in story form.
That's it. So I think from my research, they would put an outline of a brief out for what they wanted. They would approach filmmakers, or filmmakers would approach them to make the films. And then they would have to present their cuts, and then it would have to go through their own rule set, to fall into the defence regulation guidelines. So the pamphlets that they're producing is going to have the same message in the film. So nothing gets muddled. Everyone knows that you want them to think a certain way.
In this short film, there's a lot of signposting to what was at the time known as defence regulations.
Yes.
In fact, there's even a line in the film where she goes, well, owing to defence regulations, I've locked up all the maps in the house,
It's script by indoctrination, isn't it, almost?
Yes. There's a lot of exposition of the government's guidelines in cinematic form.
I think these films were put out before main releases, sort of like you'd get your newsreel, you'd get your cartoon, then you might get an MOI film, then you might get the big picture. So you're sitting there and you're forced to sit through it.
Unlike a newsreel, these Ministry of Information films have a plot, have a narrative, they're actors. In this case, it's mirroring what could be potentially real life.
You're not going to waste your 2 shillings or whatever on a MOI film, but you'll waste it on going to see the new, Gregory Peck film.
Whoever was flavour of the day, yeah. Miss Grant Goes to the Door is basically the plot of the film. She goes to the door.
She does. We're thinking, well, if this was released now with clickbait culture and...
If we're going clickbait, I thought, local woman discovers one easy trick for dealing with the Bosch.
Brilliant. Absolutely love it. You can see it currently on YouTube now. And I had, these anti-invasion life hacks will save you time and money. What Miss Grant...
Your other one was, what Miss Grant discovers at her door will shock you.
Yeah, will shock and terrify.
2 sisters living together in a quintessential quaint English village, in a cottage from an establishing shop, we find out. Now, what makes the film interesting is it's set during an attempted German invasion.
Yep.
Basically, they're coming downstairs after waking up in the morning, they're going to have their breakfast, and then there's what appears to be an air raid. The church bells are going, and the next thing is possibly one of the most scary things you could see in 1940.
Definitely.
It's a Fallschirmjäger right at the window. Brief second, it's like a 1940s jump scare.
It really is, actually. The way that's framed is it's a big panning shot of the living room.
Yeah, it's a beautiful shot. It's a very effective shot, and it does give you a fright the first time you see it.
For me, it's like Hammer horror almost. It's a bit wooden, it's a bit cheesy, but it gets the job done.
Yeah.
And I think for me, Matt will tell you, I'm probably more the jumpy person of the podcast. But when I watched it first, I wasn't expecting it.
Exactly.
And it made me jump a little bit. I was like, wow. I think it's just the way he's sort of...
Yeah, he's sort of leering through the window.
For me, it's like a psychological thing. It's like, oh my God, it's a German, but he's leering at us through the window like some sort of perverted Nazi bastard, It's sort of... It works on 2 levels.
Yeah. I mean, well, can you imagine? I imagine there would have been some gasps in the cinema.
Oh, definitely.
When it first aired.
I think if a lot of squaddies are in there, possibly not. I think they might have a bit of a laugh, but
some booze, perhaps.
Probably, yeah. But if you were young, You know, if you were maybe a housewife or something, we got to think of the time, possibly not now, but your movie going public might be a bit shocked by that.
Yeah. Well, just you know, you have to think about the situation at the time. British Army's been forced back across the Channel after Dunkirk.
Yeah. Invasion
seems imminent, which is something we'll discuss a bit more in a minute.
Later on, yeah.
Invasion is a very real threat at that point in the summer of 1940, and just, you know, all the papers are talking about the threat of paratroopers.
Yeah.
You know, there's invasion hysteria. There's a real concern, and the whole country's like a fever pitch.
Yeah, it is.
And so, you know, this brief, stark figure appearing at a window, and these women have just woken up. They've come downstairs for breakfast, and, you know, they hear a sound outside, and it's a paratrooper. That could be your window.
Yeah, it could be. It's anywhere, isn't it? Because it's unnamed. The town. It could be. It's like a rural village in England, probably southern Kent, because that's where they're expecting the raid to come.
I would guess it's on the south coast somewhere. Yeah.
And they're, you know, and then they're like, oh, don't worry, it can't hurt, you know. And then you hear this. The guy falls. This Fallschirmjäger falls. Slumps on the ground.
She opens the door.
Miss Grant opens. She does it.
Mrs. Grant goes to the door.
She does the thing they say on the title of the movie. She does it, which is amazing in films when that happens. But she opens the door.
They bring the paratrooper in. He's wounded. We don't know why he's wounded. He's probably hurt himself in the jump, I would imagine, on his landing.
Well, the fall from the window.
So, yeah. I assume that he injured himself in the jump. That would make the most sense to me.
Possibly, because I thought he was alive when he fell.
Yes, he's definitely alive, because he sort of like staggers past the window, and then they open the door and he's collapsed on the floor.
That's it.
So they bring him in. They put him on, you know, the best sofa in the sitting room.
He's still manners, politeness. This is a stranger. He's still a guest. Even if he's German, he's still a guest.
We get the very first of the sort of like instructional elements of the film.
The rhetoric, and it starts battering you over the head the minute that Nazi comes in.
One sister's more reserved, and she's, you know,
look at the blood. Oh,
she doesn't want to bring him into the house. We get this first sort of instructional element where one of the sisters brings up a newspaper, and it has an illustration of a Fallschirmjäger and what they look like.
That's it.
And they sort of like hold it up against him and go, it's a Fallschirmjäger, or it's a paratrooper.
It's a paratrooper, yeah.
And, you know, she goes and gets the first aid kit. By the time she's come back, he's died.
It's very matter of fact, you know.
Yes.
You know, it's very
They're
much...
not super shocked by the death.
No, they're not. And it's sort of a bit odd.
There's a definite stiff upper lip to their reaction to this dead Fallschirmjäger, that's for sure.
It very much is, isn't it, of the time? Because she says, like, don't worry, he can't hurt you.
Very, very practically, they then proceed to like search his body and find that he has a revolver in his jackboot. The more enterprising of the sisters takes it out and goes,
Miss Grant, that's the woman.
Yeah, obviously, of course, it's the eponymous Miss Grant.
It is.
And she takes the revolver and says, "Oh, this will come in useful." And, you know, she's looking it over,
checks it cowboy style to see if it's loaded.
Waggles it around a little bit. Yeah, she sort of like checks to see whether it's loaded or not. She like checks the chamber. I'm like, oh, okay, Miss Grant knows her stuff.
She's an aficionado. She's been watching the Armourer's Bench quite clearly. She knows her onions.
Yeah, I thought she was gonna like break it open and like start
She was, yeah. A 38. This one is.
Is this a 455 or a 38-200? Oh,
it was produced by Royal Enfield. That's a cracking little revolver.
So, yeah, and she warns.
But just sorry to interrupt. Could they not have got a Luger?
Yeah, they could. I mean, I don't know what the budget was for the film or what the availability of props were. But yeah, they could. I mean, they got SMLEs. Spoilers. That's a little later on in the film, but they did have those. I suppose there's not a lot of Lugers floating around.
Probably not.
Fairly. I suppose that's fair enough.
It's just an odd choice.
It is. It's a little bit jarring for people in the know, but I suppose at the time, a gun's a gun.
It's a gun.
I say that as a small arms historian, and that's like the worst possible thing I can say. A gun's a gun.
A gun's a gun, isn't it? Yeah, they've got bullets in them. Yeah, they'll go bang.
They all do the same job. So basically, they have a dead paratrooper on their sofa. They have a nice new revolver, and then there's a knock at the door. And who is it, Robbie?
It's he's firstly you get a lovely little shot of him on his bike, and he's a British officer. It looks to be anyway. And he knocks, and he says, "Oh, I saw a little bit of commotion going on. Can I help?" And the ladies let him in. and he seems like to be a standing up gentleman of the realm.
Yeah, he's there in his correct uniform and his Sam Brown belt.
Very smart. Yeah, looks very respectable. And there's nothing wrong with the boy. He could be.
But he's lost his map.
He's lost his map. Doesn't know where he is. So he goes,
he doesn't know where he's going.
I wonder if you have a map, perchance, an ordnance map, perhaps. And Mrs. Grant snaps.
An ordnance map, very specific. One of your lovely ordnance maps.
Mrs. Grant snaps back. Well, I've got it under lock and clear. I have to abide by defence regulations.
Exactly.
We get the battering over the head of the. Be careful, because these things are really important. If you live in a rural area, make sure you're following defence regulations, because you're going to be the first people that possibly come in contact with the Wehrmacht or the Fallschirmjäger. So Miss Grant's sister goes to get the key, and just as Miss Grant's walking off to help, he goes, "Oh, I'm looking for Jarvis Cross," and you get this sort of shot of Miss Grant, like, she's like, "You mean Jarvis Cross?" And he goes, "Oh, yes, Jarvis Cross."
No, he doesn't. She doesn't give it away straight away. No.
Does he not? Sorry, does she not get... Oh.
She's like, "Oh, yes, Jarvis Cross." And then she sort of like goes to the bureau where she's locked away her ordnance survey map.
That's it.
And quickly turns around and covers him with the revolver.
Oh, that's it, yeah. It's juicy, isn't it? "I don't think he'll be going anywhere." It's just quite an action movie line.
There's quite a quip.
And he hands up immediately. Been foiled.
Exactly. He's unarmed, which is interesting.
He is unarmed, which is weird.
I thought that was unusual.
I always assumed he was like a fifth columnist.
I assume so.
Because I don't think he was. If he was dropped with the Fallschirmjäger, then he
probably would not be in the uniform.
That's the only jarring part of the film.
Definitely.
But it's just as a sort of looking back at it now, it's kind of, well, what is he doing there? He's clearly not a Fallschirmjäger. He must be a fifth columnist.
Definitely a fifth columnist.
So after that, Miss Grant goes, go to the town, get an ARP warden or the home guards. Make sure.
Yeah, she sends her off to the police station, doesn't she? And she's sat having like a Mexican standoff with this fifth columnist. Like there's a dead Fallschirmjäger on the sofa, and there's a fifth columnist sat at her morning breakfast table.
The dinner table Mexican standoff, isn't it? The breakfast table there. But I got written down here. It's when she shouts to her sister to say, "Only tell the police or the ARP."
Oh, I'd missed that one.
For me, again, that's another
one of those instructional moments.
Really is. And I almost assumed that was because it's like in a situation such as invasion, you're going to have to rely on your friends and the local community to going to band together. So it's like, don't tell a stranger. Tell someone an ARP warden is respectable, a policeman is respectable. It's this whole class system thing coming in again that you get with these pieces. And it's like, look, you're going to have to rely on each other now because we're fighting on the home front, properly fighting something. Be careful who you talk to still.
Yeah.
We don't want to give the game away. We don't want an armoured division turning up, with Panzer IIs or whatever, flatten the bloody cottage. But it's just another sort of, it's just rhetoric all the time, and it can get it in there.
Yeah.
The film really jams it right down your throat.
So the other Miss Grant cycles off.
She does.
She actually takes the fifth columnist's bike. Did you notice that?
I didn't know, no.
Yeah. So she leaves the cottage, looks around, and, she spots the bike the fifth columnist arrived on. She's like, "I'll have that." And then she just cycles off on his bike. She cycles off into the village, and she passes...
She's young son hero. That's, later on, that's why he can't escape.
Exactly. His
his
escape plan's just foiled completely. All he wanted was a map, Robbie. That's all he wanted.
He did want a blooming map,
And foiled by these two plucky Grant sisters.
Exactly.
So
heroes.
She cycles
heroes
off.
Of Kent.
She cycles off, and on the way to the police station, she passes a unusual looking thing suspended from a tree.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's a Fallschirmjäger weapons container.
It is.
It is.
But we don't know that yet. We don't know that.
Yet.
I mean, we know that because we're quote unquote historians, but the viewing public doesn't. But
exactly,
it's shot really nicely. She goes past and she sort of she looks at it like, what?
It's all really simple, but it's all really nicely done. The other Miss Grant arrives at the ARP warden, and the ARP warden says, "Go and tell the LDV, the local defence volunteers." She
reaches the ARP warden's post, and he says, "This is a job for the..."
I think he says LDV.
I assume he says LDV, but he says, it's weird how he says it. Yeah. Because I thought he said it's like a job for the doctor or something. it's not what he says. It's like been changed.
You see, now that would be interesting because obviously they've been called the local defence volunteers for some time.
Maybe he says the DVs, not the defence volunteers.
That might be right. You might say that. But obviously, the local defence volunteers sort of change name.
Yeah, they do.
Because Churchill doesn't think local defence volunteers is punchy enough.
It's look, duck and vanish, isn't it? That's what people say.
So he basically says, in July, like late July, we're going to change the name to Home Guard. So the film actually comes out on, I think, the 5th of August.
It's 5th of August, 1940. Yeah.
So by that point, the LDV name is just about 2 weeks out of date.
Yeah.
And a lot of the secondary source material is like, oh, that's a real faux part.
They wouldn't have minded that.
That's one of the errors in the film. I don't think people would have minded. I don't think it would have been something that people would have gone.
Like knowing a little bit about the Home Guard history. Some units might not have even had their armbands yet.
Oh God, no, they wouldn't. They've had all the LDV armbands printed up. They had millions of those.
Yeah, they had too many of them.
It'd be months before the rest of the Home Guard got the new Home Guard ones.
Yeah, so some units don't even have rifles.
Exactly.
By this time, it's a complete potluck whether you're getting what you need. So yeah, we cut to the we'll say Home Guard from now on. People know what we mean.
There's an LDV Home Guard meeting going on, and they're getting a briefing. They're getting an instructional presentation by who I assume is an NCO.
They're all looking lovely. They've got their 37 pattern on, their LDV armbands on. They look very smart, which is complete.
They're very well equipped.
Yeah, which is complete negates everything you hear about early Home Guard sort of experiences where some guys just had jackets, some guys just had caps.
They've all got short magazine Lee Enfields as well.
They do. They're incredibly well armed for 1940. But yet again, as we say, this is the propaganda piece, isn't it? Yeah, you don't want to show the public that your local defence volunteer force might only have a shotgun and a load of pikes or something. You don't want to show that. You want to show we're armed to the bloody teeth. Come on, Hitler, do your worst, because we've all got short magazine Lee Enfields and spigot mortars and rocket guns and whatever. We're here. We can take you on.
Well, you never know. There might have been a fifth columnist in the cinema.
There might have been. Yeah, and then they would have reported back. Oh, this is Miss Grant film. Was it Home Defence Volunteers? All have Lee Enfields.
Oh, it's Robbie's German accent. I feel we're going to hear that so many times during this series.
He should not invade.
Because I can't do one.
Call the invasion off. Mrs. Grant is more than a match for our Wehrmacht divisions.
So the instructional briefing that we interrupt is basically, very helpfully, it's about paratroopers and the threat of paratroopers.
It's almost as if it was scripted, isn't it? Almost like it's a film that we're watching.
It's bloody lucky that they found out what to do right on the eve of the invasion.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a just a break in the narrative here, but why are they having a briefing in the morning?
Bit odd, isn't it? They'd all be at work.
Maybe they'd just been on like a patrol, on patrol, and they come in, and they hadn't had time to do like the evening instructional bit, and he's gone like, we'll do it quick now, lads. Don't worry. It's just paratroopers. It's not important, It's fine. Anyway, let's get back to the plot. I'm off on a tangent there.
So then he points to this canister, and he goes, "Look, make sure that they're unarmed unless they get to their canisters."
Which is true.
Of weapons. Yeah, that's factual, really factual. But this is something I wanted to say, actually.
Go ahead.
When Mrs. Grant looks at that little cross-section thing of a paratrooper in the paper, it wrongly states that they drop with their MP40s.
Oh, okay. I didn't notice that.
Because it says submachine gun attached to web belt, just in the corner. I blew the image up online. And I was like, well, then later on, it's wrong. So I reckon, this is just conjecture, but I reckon that they got that from an actual paper, proper paper.
I think I've seen that in illustration before.
But it's like, that's wrong, though, because you're providing the right information in the film. It's just a little bit of an odd tidbit there. But anyway, and then you've got the lovely wooden incendiary grenades, wooden Mills bombs.
Yeah, so he opens up this, he's like, it's about 5 foot by 2 foot, and he opens up these 2 doors. It's marvellous that the local defence volunteers have these instructional aids.
It's great.
And he's like, you've got your hand grenades, which are they're Mills bombs, basically.
Yeah.
They're not German.
They're not German
hand
stick
grenades
grenades
of any description.
Well, those incendiary grenades, I thought they were meant to be stick grenades.
They're a bit big, though, aren't they?
They're massive.
They're huge.
You could club someone to death with them rather than throw them.
What does he call them? He calls them flame grenades.
Flame grenades, yeah. And
they're
I'm
clearly meant to be incendiaries, but like.
Do the Fallschirmjäger even have those? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not a grenade expert, so
it's a bit overkill. Wouldn't want to jump from an aircraft with an incendiary bomb.
Well, they wouldn't. They would be in the container. That's why.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Wrong again.
I honestly, I don't know of any German hand grenades that were.
It's weird, isn't it?
Incendiary at that point.
I think it's to scare you, isn't it? It's the scare factor, surely. Oh God, these guys have got flame bombs.
Yeah, well, and they have extra Tommy guns. It says he explicitly says extra Tommy guns, and they are literally wooden mock-ups of Tommy guns. They are the outline of like an M1928 Thompson.
Yeah, which is
reality,
weird.
It'd be an MP38.
MP38, yeah, or
so
carbines or whatever.
Yeah, it'd be Car 98K or an MP38 at that point.
I wonder if that's just what they had lying around to put in there, because I know that some Home Guard divisions trained with wooden mock-ups.
I would imagine it's just a prop they had.
Just what they've got
in the studio, maybe.
It's a bit odd.
Yeah, it's unusual. I mean, it's unusual that they included actual Mills bombs.
Oh, they proper Mills bombs in there.
They look like actual Mills bombs. I mean, I might be wrong, but they're Mills bomb patterned. They're clearly not German grenades, but they look like actual Mills bombs.
Perhaps it's just iconography for the viewer. That's what a gun. Yeah. You know, you've got your gangster films are popular in the 20s and 30s. Everyone knows what a Tommy gun is. So possibly that's why they chose it. You know, we'll never know.
Obviously, the meeting's interrupted, but they've learnt enough. They know, and the instructor says, if you don't have time to capture the actual container, put a few rounds into it and destroy it. And
it'll blow up.
It'll blow up. I don't know how a few rounds will blow up, but spoilers, one does.
It goes up like a Raytheon.
So the next scene cuts back to Miss Grant.
It does, yeah. And she's still with our friend Jerry.
No. A cheeky fifth columnist is asking for a cigarette. He's just listed as the officer.
The officer, yeah.
In the credits, yeah.
So he's got his hands up and Mrs. Grant's got the Webley on him. And he's just he's giving her like doe eyes almost, isn't he? Puppy dog eyes.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, please. And he's like gesturing at this little box of cigarettes. And she's like, I wouldn't trust one of you an inch.
She's very resolute.
It's that line, isn't it? I love that line. It's like, don't trust anyone.
I wouldn't trust one of you an inch.
Exactly.
Or some such.
It's very anti-German rhetoric again.
Oh, yes.
And then he's like, oh, please. And then
she caves. She caves to the German.
Pretty bloody quickly as well.
Like,
and she throws a cigarette. It misses.
What makes me laugh is she goes, "Oh no, I've made a mess of throwing that."
Yeah, she goes to grab it.
Half misses, and she goes for it, and he grabs the gun.
Yeah, absolutely wrestles it off her.
Yeah,
you know,
batters it to the ground.
It's almost like her staunch Britishness cannot handle the fact that she hasn't physically given him the cigarette to smoke. Even though he's a fifth columnist.
I know. Well, I thought there was going to be...
man.
When I was watching it for the first time, I thought she was going to offer to light it for him, and that was going to be the moment he pounced.
Turns out the Webley's just one of those fancy lighters.
You know, poor Miss Grant's been battered to the ground. He then enters a weird sort of like panic, doesn't he?
He gets really sort of, I've got to get out of here.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you noticed, it might just be me, but the minute that scene happens, he loses his hat in the struggle, I think, and then he gets this like Hitler-esque fop of hair that comes down over his face.
Oh, does he?
Did you notice that?
No, I
thought
it
was me just clutching at straws, but I was like, no, because that's what your average 1940s civilian thinks a Nazi looks like. They all look like Hitler, and he's like, oh, you know, all like German sort of halfness, sort of trying to.
So he sort of storms out the house. Is absolutely fuming at the other Grant sister that she's nicked his bike.
Absolutely raging.
So he runs to the shed, puts 2 rounds into the shed door to open it, which is, I thought, you know, it's only a shed door, you know.
You should pull it open,
just
mate.
do that with your shoulder, but fair enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, he puts 2 rounds in the door with the Webley, and he tries to get into their automobile, their motor car. He tries to commit Grand Theft Auto.
He does. GTA 1940.
And guess what they've done, Robbie? Per defence regulations, they've immobilised the vehicle. They've removed the spark plugs.
They have.
Or the starter motor, I don't know which. I wasn't quite sure. but they've immobilized it anyway.
Get that lovely shot of him looking and like, he's so angry at that.
I might have imagined it, but I swear to God, he says like "Scheiße."
Yeah, I think he does actually.
Yeah,
he definitely says some German swear
there's
words.
definitely some kind of German cursing going on. And then he goes to the bike.
Yeah, the bike.
He tries to nick Miss Grant's bike. Bike for a bike.
He has
eye for an eye.
Eye for an eye, bike for a bike. Yeah.
And he puts like another round into the bike lock.
Yeah.
And he just can't get. Spoilers out there. Shooting locks does not work in reality. No. It's not the easiest way of opening a lock. That's for sure.
It's a bit of movie magic there, isn't it?
Yeah. So he puts another round in the bike lock, and that doesn't work. And he sort of like shakes it in frustration, and then runs out of the garage again, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. By which time, thank God, other Miss Grants arrive back with the home guard.
And as they're travelling in their lovely, well, I don't know what that car was. It someone will know when they watch it, but it's a very nice that the fact this home guard unit have their own car.
Well, yeah. Perhaps the doctor is the NCO of the local
urgent response team home guard
unit. Yeah,
possibly.
Maybe that was a scene that was cut, an establishing shot of him like with a stethoscope.
Yeah. But they drive past the canister, don't they? And you get the shot of him shooting the canister and blowing it up.
Someone hangs out the window and there's a drive-by.
Is it with a Webley?
With a Mark, I want to say 4?
Mark 4.
So either a Mark 4 or a 6, I can't remember which. One would be 4.55 and one would be 38-200 for the gun aficionados out there.
That's it. Yeah, it is.
Very difficult to make out in the film, although Taff Gillingham, our good friend, did say it was probably a Mark 4.
Mark 4, he said, Mark 4. V, Roman numeral.
4.55.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. But it goes up. Canister absolutely goes up.
It does. The briefing was exactly right. It totally destroyed that canister. It was those
massive explosions.
Those damned flame grenades. The flame grenades setting off the Mills bombs.
Yeah.
Causing it spontaneous combustion of the lovely wooden extra Tommy guns they had in there.
Exactly. It's all kindling. It's all dry kindling.
But it's a great shot. It's a really effective scene. Like it adds a little bit more action and breaks up the film.
Because it ramps, doesn't it?
It does.
After the bit with Miss Grant getting tackled, it does ramp up a lot.
It does.
Which is good. It's a good look. It's a nice little set piece.
Yeah.
And then you've got Mr. Fritz. He's trying to run away. He's looking where to go. He didn't know where to go. And then lo and behold, the home guard turn up. They get out. And the minute he sees the home guard, drops a Webley and is taken prisoner.
Yep. Hands up straight away. Complete surrender.
He's got 3 rounds left in that Webley. He could have gone for it.
That's very true. He could have put up a fight.
Very quickly defeated.
He is very quickly defeated. And perhaps that's another one of those sort of like things that they're trying to hint at. Like with the slightest bit of resistance, the Germans, they'll give up. Perhaps that's what they're trying to insinuate there.
Yeah, it probably is. Don't worry, because we've got this covered. The 3 home guards have got this covered.
Yeah, they have to instill a little bit of, a bit of bravado, a bit of like confidence into it. Mm-hmm. So the film sort of ends with the home guard NCO and the 2 Grant sisters, the heroes, sitting down to morning tea. And there's a little bit where he goes, she offers him sugar, and he's like, "Can you spare it?
Milk and sugar? Yeah. Can you spare it? Oh, you've earned it."
It adds to that, everyday thing that people would have understood. Rationing is very much in force at this point.
You keep your sugar and stuff and milk for best or whatever.
Yeah, it's a precious commodity, and offering him a tea with milk and sugars, it's a big deal. Even though he's rescued them, essentially,
He did the hard yards, bless him.
The film sort of rounds out. What do they say at the end? There's sort of...
Well, he says that the important thing, ladies, is that you kept your heads.
That's it.
And according to my research, that was a big thing the MOI were pushing in their leaflets, in their pamphlets, was keep your head.
Yes.
Was sort of a thing, like don't panic. And he, Miss Grant also says, I knew that something was afoot almost when he said Jarvis Cross, not Jarvis Cross. And she was like, this is important. Everyone should remember. Keep him talking. He'll slip himself up somehow.
Give the game away, yeah, exactly. It's a very effective combination of pushing instructional elements, instilling some stiff upper lip, let's say, and enshrining it all into a neat cinematic package, which is entertaining. Rodney Ackland, who was in charge of the screenplay, the dialogue, and was sort of the assistant director, he says, when a rough cut was screened at the War Office for the War Office brass hats, a brigadier general said he had never been so scared in his life. The picture was pronounced far too frightening to be shown. The whole thing must be reshot again as a comedy.
Oh my God.
So what we're seeing is the second version.
Yeah, that's the lighter cut. And it makes you think, what the hell did they cut then? Because even with the second cut, it's still a bit.
It's still pretty, it's not tame.
What the hell did they cut?
She gets beaten down.
Yeah, it's a bit of a rough and tumble. There's explosions, there's gunshots, there's uncertainty whether the Home Guard will turn up in time. It's very odd for us now to look back at then and think that's shocking.
Yeah.
Makes you think what they cut. Did Fritz get hold of an MP40 and massacre the town?
Well, exactly.
But I've got here from some other research that there's a Ministry of Information daily report on morale of the 5th of August 1940, the day
it came out.
This film
yeah.
that we're talking, the day it came out. It says, the Prime Minister's message on invasion was warmly welcomed by those in positions of responsibility, and reports indicate that his warning was not without effect. Nevertheless, there are many who say that, taking into account the popular view, that the invasion is off. So even in early August, your public opinion is, they won't invade. They're not going to bother now. The RAF will knock them back. The Navy will knock them back. That report goes into the fact that it was housewives of London were more concerned about getting eggs than they were about the invasion.
I can understand that. A normal person is more concerned with the day-to-day, the necessities of life than they are.
Of course they are.
The troubles of governments. Let's say.
But these little reports are crap.
What a great source that is.
And there's one every day from like late May right up until early October. But from a sort of a viewer's perspective of the time, I found a documentary newsletter from September 1940.
All right.
And Tom Harrison writes, he was a pioneer of mass observation as well. So he was one of the people who set the MOI into sort of into happening. He wrote, Miss Grant goes to the door, best liked of the Ministry of Information shorts, apart from terrifying some rural spinsters and widows, was incidental propaganda for a people's war. The whole solution of her problem depended on her getting a revolver from the fortunately placed corpse. The sight of his untrained hand wielding the weapon, however ineffectively, at once played on the secret wish to have some weapon of protection in times like these. Trivial examples of this sort can be multiplied, and it's really amazing that any informed propaganda unit can have produced this for general distribution. So in that newsletter, a lot of people say out of the sort of shorts they saw, Miss Grant is the only one that had any true effect on them as like moviegoers.
So that's the one that had the most resonance.
Yeah. And it was played on Channel 4 in the 80s. That they aired it a few times.
Was it really? I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
A YouTuber that I was watching who uploaded it, but that they captured it on video from a 1985 showing on Channel 4.
Oh, okay.
As part of a Britain at War season.
Well, it's a really interesting artifact of that period of very visceral concern about an invasion.
Yeah.
And what can be worse for a country than the threat of invasion?
Of course. Just after Dunkirk as well.
Yeah. It's literally, 3 months?
It's weeks, really, isn't it? It's like 6 weeks, something like that. Yeah. The last lads get taken off on, the 3rd or 4th of June or something?
Yeah.
And you've had the defence regulations come in, you've had the Home Guard set up, you've had fault lines created, you've had people, you've had children evacuated, so you're seeing it all the time. Propaganda posters everywhere. You've got speeches in Parliament about what to do about invasion. You've got leaflets, newspapers as well,
radio addresses.
Right, everyone's whipping you up into a frenzy of, tomorrow they might drop parachutists.
But it's interesting to see that that MOI source that you found, concern wasn't that high at that point.
No, and that also goes. Sorry, yeah, it goes in to say that the bank holiday, people were out like in normal numbers. No one was scared. There was more worry about whether there would be enough trains or something to actually take them to the seaside. They're not meant to be there, and that's the worst place to go if you think about it. So Matthew, any final thoughts on the film?
No, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was effective. I thought it was an interesting sort of artifact and resource for understanding what was going through the minds of both government and the average person at the time. I thought it was a well-shot film, nicely made, well worth spending 8 minutes, or as I watched it like 3 or 4 times. And it also is like stands a rewatch as well, which is, you know,
Yeah, it holds up to a second viewing.
a bit of a testament to such a short, quickly made film.
I think we're viewing it through our sort of historical eyes, but just as a short little snippet of a film, it is interesting to watch from a completely non-historical approach. It is a nice little movie. The thing I took away from it was it's nice to know that they were making films like that for people, in a sense. So if I put myself in the shoes of someone who was watching it for the first time, and I was like, well, if I'm in a cinema, and I'll take solace in thinking that, oh, the Ministry of Information, they're thinking about me and my needs. You know, what's going to happen to me if we get invaded? Oh yeah, we've got the Home Guard. You know, the Fifth Columnists are going to get slipped up because I'm too clever.
Well, if Miss Grant can come through, so can I.
If a 40-year-old woman can possibly not give a cigarette to a Fifth Columnist, but
she won't do that again. She won't be giving any more Fifth Columnists ciggies. No way.
She'll learn. You know, keep her gold cut away from them. We hope you've enjoyed listening to us ramble on about a nearly 70-year-old film. Well, more than 70-year-old film now. Yeah,
thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget to follow us both on Twitter. I'm at Historic Firearm.
I am at RM_Millie_history.
Well, there you go. That's easy to remember. And don't forget to follow the podcast Twitter at Fighting on Film. And special thanks to our executive producer, Katie Maguire.
This is the Fighting on Film podcast, saying good night and good bless and good viewing.